Hello students, myself Dr. Jyoti, Associate Professor in Botany, Government Colleges are. Under the aegis of Director General Higher Education Haryana for undergraduate botany classes, I will teach you pollination mechanism and adaptations. So what is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from anther of a stamen to the receptive stigma of the carpel. Pollination is of two types, self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, it involves transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower or genetically similar flower. Cross-pollination is the transfer of pollen from anther of one flower to the stigma of genetically different flower. Self-pollination is further of two types, autogamy and geitonogamy. In autogamy, transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the same flower take place, and mostly it occurs in bisexual flower. Bisexual flower means in the same flower male and female reproducing parts are present, that is stamens and pistil or carpel is present. It occurs for example in pea, wheat and rice. Other is geitonogamy. In geitonogamy, there is transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. That is, it mostly occurs in the monoecious condition, that is, unisexual flower, and male and female flowers are present on the same plant. Self-pollination also occurs in Cleistogamous flowers. Cleistogamous flowers means some plants never open to ensure complete pollination. To ensure pollination, that is, they never open but they show the phenomenon of self-pollination. This condition is called as Cleistogamy. For example, Commelina bengalensis, oxalis and viola. Self-pollination, that is autogamy, it also occurs in chasmogamous flower, that is, which open at the time of maturation of both male and female sex parts, that is, stamens and carpel mature at the same time and they ensure pollination. Next is cross-pollination. As cross-pollination is also called as xenogamy or allogamy. And in this, there is transfer of pollen from the flower of one plant to the stigma of the flower of another plant. In nature, self-pollination bears some barriers or creates some barriers so that it permits or it encourages cross-pollination. These barriers are hercogamy, dichogamy, self-incompatibility, male sterility, dioecision, heterostyly. So what is hercogamy? Hercogamy is, that is, in some bisexual flower, structure of male and female sex organs provide a barrier to self-pollination. This is known as hercogamy, and it may be either due to the conditions of stamens, stigma. Sometimes stigma projects beyond the stamens, for example in Caryophyllaceae, and in family Asclepiadaceae, where gynospecium and pollinia are developed. That is, pollinium is a compound pollen grains or complex pollen grains, and they are attached to a disc. This is also structure of pollinia in Calotropis. Pollinia are attached to the through cortical stalk to a disc, and these are then attached to the pentaangular disc in case of Calotropis, and this disc is called as now gynostasium. These structures, gynostasium and pollinia, doesn't allow self-pollination. Then other barrier is which doesn't allow self-pollination is dichogamy. Dichogamy occurs in some bisexual plants where male and female sex organs mature at different times. That is protandry and protogyny. Protandry means protoandry. That is androecium matures first or stamens mature first, and protogyny, in this condition, proto means first, gyne means gynoecium. Gynoecium mature first, and in such conditions cross-pollination take place. Protandry occurs in maize, clerodendron, chenopodium, and protogyny take place in Rosaceae family, Cruciferae family. Other barrier which enhances cross-pollination is self-incompatibility. In self-incompatibility, in this case, the pollen grains of the same plant or same flower doesn't set or doesn't germinate on the stigma of the same plant or same flower, because stigma doesn't allow, or sometimes pollen tube also fail to germinate. This is called as self-incompatibility, and this is common in potato, tobacco and brassica. Then is male sterility. Male sterility, male sex organs are non-functional. They doesn't allow the gynoecium of the same flower to gynoecium to ensure pollination, and also male sterile lines enhances cross pollination. Next is dioecious. Dioecious, in case of dioecious plants, in this case male and female flowers are present on different plants. That's why they cannot that is self-pollination cannot take place. Other is heterostyly. This is a special type of structural mechanism in plants to encourage cross-pollination and to avoid self-pollination. In this case, it may be distyly or tristyly. Dimorphic heterostyly occurs in primula, and trimorphic heterostyly occurs in oxalis. In dimorphic, that is, styles are of two types, that is long styled and short styled. In this case, style is long, and in this case, style is short, or they are called L-morph or S-morph. And in tristyly, the styles are of three types. So in such condition, cross-pollination take place. So what is the advantages of cross-pollination? First of all, I will discuss what are the agents of cross-pollination. In nature, as cross-pollination doesn't take place itself, that is, plant do not have any device or any structural devices to facilitate cross-pollination itself. They depend upon external agents, and they are biotic and abiotic. Abiotic agents are wind and water, and pollination by wind is called as anemophily. and pollination by water is called as hydrophily. And biotic agents are also there. The biotic agents are insects, birds, and bats. And pollination by insects is called as entomophily. Pollination by birds is called as ornithophily, and pollination by bats is called as chiropterophily. Now, pollination by wind, that is in wind pollinated flowers, this is called as anemophily. In this case the flowers are inconspicuous and not showy, and they don't secrete scent and nectar. They produce large quantity of pollen grains and dusty pollen grains, and pollen grains are dry and unwettables. In this case, anthers are versatile. Versatile means anther lobes are attached to the connective only at a point. That is, it may swing in air. So, in this case, this anemophilus is a wasteful process because plant has to produce pollen grains in abundance. In very large amount, it has to produce pollen grains. For example, in case of cannabis, a single flower produces 5 lakh pollen grains. And this process is also hit and miss method. If on the way other flower that is bearing stigma come in contact, then pollination will take place, and no guaranteed method of ensuring pollination. And examples of this type of wind pollinated flowers are, it occurs in grasses, sugarcane, bamboos, coconut, palm, cannabis, maize, etc. Then is hydrophily. In hydrophily, pollination occurs with the help of water. Pollinating agent is water. This is abiotic agent, and in this case, the characteristics of hydrophilous flowers is pollen grains are light but covered with wax. That is, pollen grains are unwettable. Stigma are long and sticky. Flowers are usually small and inconspicuous, and hydrophily occurs either the plants are submerged or free floating. In this case, no scent, no color, no nectar. That is, scent, color and nectar are absent. Hydrophily occurs in both the conditions, that is, in case of hypohydrogamous condition, that is in case of Zostera, pollination occurs below the surface of water. In Zostera, this is a submerged marine angiosperm. In this case, pollen grains are long, elongated, exceptionally long, and needle-like and without exine. These pollen grains float below the surface of water. Because they can float below the surface of water because the specific gravity of pollen grains is same as that of water. When these pollen grains touch the long stigma, they coil around the stigma and germinate. Then hydrophily occurs over the surface of water in case of Vallisneria. In Vallisneria, it is called as epihydrophily. Vallisneria is also a submerged freshwater hydrophyte, and it is a dioecious plant. That is, male and female flowers are borne on different plants. In this case, male flowers, when mature, they are abscised from the spadix, and float on the surface of water. When female flowers mature, when mature, they also float over the surface of water, but they are attached with the style or long stalk. When male flowers come in contact with the female flowers over the surface of water, pollination takes place, and when fertilization occurs, then female flowers come down the water, that is by the rolling of the stalk of the flower. This is very not hydrophily is not very common in all the plants, but especially in some plants this type of pollination occurs. Then is entomophily. In entomophily, pollination occurs by insects. Insects which visit these are the pollinator, and the pollination when occurs by insects, mostly the insects which cause pollination are moth, flies, butterflies, wasps, bees, beetle, etc. In entomophilous flowers are large in size, conspicuous, brightly colored, and showy to attract insect as a pollinator. And in this case, the flower also produces pollen grains and stigma which are sticky. And these flowers are rich in nectar. These flowers are beautifully colored and fragrance is also present. Due to smell, the insects, pollinators visit the flower also. And when the insect pollinators visit the flower, they visit in search of nectar or in search of pollen grains. In some cases, like when in case of Ophiris, the insect visit the flower in case of that is its mate, that is false mate, and to deceive. In that case, in case of Ophiris, the plant or flower take the shape of a female wasp. In some cases, the flowers are that is pollinated by means, especially in case of figs, that is they are pollinated by wasp. In this case also it come to the flower for ensuring the wasp wasp visit the flower for the laying eggs. And in case of pollination, when the insects visit the flower, in this case they mostly bees are which when bees visit the flower, bees are the insects which can perceive ultraviolet radiations, and due to ultraviolet radiations they are attracted towards the bright colors of the flowers. And entomophilous flowers also produce pollen grains which contain sticky substance which is called as pollen kit, which acts as a insect attractants. Also it helps in the attachment of the pollen grains to the insect body. Among insects, bees are the most common pollinator. Most of the 80% pollination is ensured by bees. And one important thing, when the pollinator visit, that is insect visit the flower, the time for the maturation of the flower and the visit of the insect, it correlates. And in case of bees, especially when bees visit the flower for nectar or pollen grains, then when it comes out of from the hive, it makes special type of communication with the other bees by performing a dance on the hive. And they perform either vogal dance or eight dance. So this will ensure, that is, it will also allow other bees to go for pollination or in search of nectar. Then is pollination by means of birds. This is called as ornithophily. In this case, the flowers are larger in size, brightly colored, and in brightly colored flowers, these flowers are mostly red, orange colored, and the flower is stout. Flower is stout so that it can bear the weight of the bird which come to get nectar or pollen grains. In this case, the flowers are odorless except few. Corolla are tubular shaped or cup shaped or funnel shaped, and pistil and stamens project beyond the perianth. A large quantity of pollen and nectar is produced by insect pollinated flowers. The flowers which are bird pollinated flowers, these are bombax, bottle brush, bignonia, agave, nicotiana. And one thing more, the birds can consume half of its body weight of the nectar of the flower in a single day. So, and the birds which ensure pollination are hummingbird and sunbird. Then is pollination by bats. This is called as chiropterophily. In this case, bats are the mammals which ensure pollination. And in this case, flowers are large, exposed and tough, mostly open in the evening because as bats are nocturnal, and flowers are mostly dull in color because it can make contrast with the darkness of the night. So there will be color contrast, black and white, that is light and dark color contrast is there. These flowers produce strong odor, that is smell is produced, and this smell is of sour milk or musty, which is liked by the bats. The flowers which are pollinated by the bats are Adansonia, Digitatia, Bohenia, Megalander, and in this case pollen and nectar are produced in large quantity. Then is what are the advantages of self-pollination and cross-pollination? Self-pollination produces the purity of race, that is, it avoids mixing or it maintains the purity of the race. In this case, in self-pollination, chances of pollination are more, and it need not to produce a large number of pollen grains. But what is the disadvantage of self-pollination? Due to continuously producing same type of flower, that is, as there is no change in, as purity of race is there, the progeny will get weaker generation after generation, and there are less chances of production of new species and varieties. And advantages of cross-pollination is, that is, it produces new varieties, and in this case yield of the crop increases. Several crop plants like mustard, safflower, sunflower, clover, cucurbits, almonds, they give significantly higher yield. And it also ensures as cross-pollination takes place, variation occurs, and this may result in the production of disease-resistant plant. Cross-pollination also results in production of seed in self-sterile plants. But what is the disadvantage of cross-pollination? In this case, a lot of waste of energy occurs. In this case, wastage of energy is very high because plant has to produce a large number of pollen grains and accessory structure. And in case of it causes also in some cases blending of characters and purity of race is eliminated, and sometimes unwanted characters are also added in each generation. However, we cannot avoid all these processes and they are beneficial for the progress of the nature. So let me ask you some important questions or some short answer type question. What is dichogamy? What is autogamy and geitonogamy? What are the devices or the barriers which ensure cross-pollination? And what is the role of inflorescence in pollination? Thank you.